In this video, we're going to look at a game that Fabiano Caruana played in the U.S. Championship against Andrew Tang. Andrew Tang, with the white pieces, played the Jobava London system, and there's no polite way to put this. Caruana completely dismantled him in what is a pretty pleasing to the eye game if you have the black pieces and play against the Jobava London system. So what I'm going to do in this video, I'm going to go over that game fairly quickly, and then I am going to give a mini repertoire that I think white can play as Jobava London players to deal with Caruana's variation, because in the game, what Grandmaster Andrew Tang did not work very well. So let's look at this quite beautiful game, and then let's look at a possible refutation. The game begins d4. Knight f6, bishop f4, and g6 is played by Caruana. And now knight to c3, this traditional Jobava London formation, d5 and e3. Now here we see the first idea that Caruana has, and that is to go after the bishop pair, which he does immediately with knight to h5, immediately attacking this bishop on f4. This is one of three strategic goals I think Caruana had in this game. Now, in this game, Andrew Tang plays bishop to e5, which is not going to be what I recommend in my mini repertoire later in the video. And f6 was played by Caruana, and now the bishop goes back to g3. He will be able to take the bishop if he chooses later. And the second goal for Caruana in this position, in addition to grabbing the bishop pair, is to play the move e5 and get not only his share of the center, but a little bit more of the position in the center. c6 is played to stabilize d5, bishop to d3, and knight to d7. You can see Caruana preparing this e5 push, bishop h4 and e5, and he has achieved his goal already. He didn't grab the bishop pair, but he has gotten that space in the center. And the third goal, and this is true of any time a stronger player plays somebody playing a system opening. Well, it actually doesn't matter if they're stronger or not. When you play against someone who's playing a system opening, like the Jobava London, the London system, the Kali system, King's Indian attack, whatever. Any opening where white just wants to set up his pieces in a specific formation, his pawns a specific way, black wants to make the game messy early on. You want to keep white from getting comfortable and establishing the piece and pawn formation they want to play. Bishop e2 is played by Grandmaster Tang, aiming at the knight at h5. The knight goes back to g7. And now the best move is probably to take on e5. After knight e5, you can see this is nothing like a traditional Jobava London, but Andrew Tang actually plays e4, complicating matters in the center, and he makes the position messy on his own. But this gives Grandmaster Caruana a great opportunity, and he plays the move queen to b6, hitting the pawn at b2, as well as hitting the pawn at d4. ed5 is played now, knight to f5, hitting the bishop on h4. dc6 is an intermezzo. If he takes the bishop, white would take the knight at d7 with check. So bc6, but now the bishop hangs and the pawn at b2 hangs. So knight to f3 is played to develop the last minor piece and defend the bishop at h4. But now queen takes b2, and Caruana has a little material. He's actually equalized material. He's going to win material here very soon. The knight goes to e4, aiming at f6, but now knight takes bishop, knight takes h4, f5 kicks this knight out of its nice central position, rook to b1, but now queen d4. And Caruana has won a central pawn, and we can see not only does he have dominance in the center, but he also has two bishops, and he's going to use these bishops beautifully as the game progresses. Queen d4, ed4, knight to d2, knight to b6, knight h to f3, re-centralizing that knight. Now bishop to e6. He immediately goes after this pawn at a2. Knight takes d4, bishop takes a2, and this pawn at a7 is a very, very powerful passed pawn. This, along with this bishop pair, it's really going to be hard, if not impossible, to stop the advance of that pawn. Rook to c1, the rook was under attack, obviously. Bishop to h6, now look at these bishops. This bishop cuts across the h6, c1 diagonal, pinning the knight at d2. c4 is played, and now long castle. and he's centralizing his rooks. He's winning a tempo against the knight at d4 with the rook. Now the other rook is coming, and white's king is still on the center. White is in huge trouble. Knight 4 to f3, rook h to e8. Black's pieces are beautifully placed here. Rook to c2, steps out of the pin and attacks the bishop at a2. But now this gorgeous response from Caruana. Look at this, knight to a4. The idea is that if rook takes a2, he can play rook takes e2 check. Not the only winning move, but king e2, knight c3 check. And now after king f1, knight takes a2, black's converging on the knight at d2. He's got the passed pawn, and this rook at h1 is locked in. Black is completely winning this position. So instead, Grandmaster Tang plays h4, hoping to play knight to g5 to block this bishop on h6. The bishop goes back to g7, castles, and now knight to c3. Again, defending the bishop at a2, but also attacking the bishop at e2, bishop d1, and then a5. And white is completely frozen in this position. And in this position, Grandmaster Andrew Tang resigned. And of course, Caruana went on to win the U.S. Championship just recently. So what then should we play instead? So my recommendation, it's not going to let you beat Caruana, obviously, but maybe the local club player who wants to emulate Caruana, maybe you can give them a pretty hard time. Instead of recommending Grandmaster Tang's move bishop to e5, I'm going to recommend bishop to g5. This, I think, does a better job of saving that bishop than the bishop e5 does. If here f6 is in the game, the bishop can go back to h4. And you can't play g5 here, obviously, because queen takes knight with check. And then the game's just over at that point. So if black plays, say, c6, that's the same stabilizing move, then bishop to e2, you're aiming at the knight at the h5, and then when the knight moves, you just retreat the bishop back to g3, and white is keeping things in normal territory and has prevented giving up the bishop pair, and at the moment we even be clamping down on the e5 square, so that would be a good achievement. Much more likely move here would be h6, then bishop to h4, and if g5, that's just losing, as queen takes knight, pawn takes bishop, queen to e5, attacks the rook at h8, that rook moves over, and now knight to d5, threatening knight c7 check, and also knight to f6 mate is actually being threatened at the moment, so that would be a very good position. So bishop g7 is a much more likely move, but then bishop to e2, again attacking that knight, so the knight needs to move to f6, and then just knight to f3. And you can see that white is in much more standard Jobava London structures. With the bishop pair, e5 is not available to black, and the position isn't messy. White's keeping things under control here. And if c6, a much more stable move from black, bishop to d3, h6, bishop g4, bishop g7. Now here in this position, black is threatening a quick e5, but now just f4, playing it like it's a stone wall. And you'll notice that while these pawns are on dark squares, the dark square bishop is outside of the pawn chain and on a very effective diagonal. e5 has been prevented. Knight is coming to f3, and white preserves understanding of standard structure here, the stonewall structure, the bishop pair, and e5 is clamped down on. So this is sort of my my mini repertoire against Caruana's line against the Jobava London. I hope it suits you well. I hope it works well. Thank you for joining us at Chess Dog. See you again soon.